On the farm, the reality was the harder that people worked, the less they got. In a cruel twist of fate, as farm efficiency increased, the more people produced, the price on commodities dropped lower and lower and lower all through this entire time period. Farmers, though, had to pay higher and higher prices to the railroads, to the grain storage facilities, etc., and they felt they were losing all of their money to the middlemen in terms of their business transactions at the time. One of the solutions that agricultural America saw to this was they wanted more money in circulation for all the reasons we indicated here. They figured more money would solve their problem. More money would make prices rise. More money would make it easier for them to get credit and loans that they needed, and also more money would make it easier for them to pay off their debts. Financiers and bankers and commercial people, they don't want this at all, but so you see this struggle taking place. Hence, you see the formation of the Greenback Party, which was the party that was dedicated to seeing more paper money in circulation. Now, to explain where this paper money came from originally, we do have to go back to a little bit of history from the Civil War era. As you remember from your class in earlier reviews, the Bank of the United States goes away in 1832. After this period, there's no central bank, there's no central financial economic planning by the United States government in any way whatsoever. In 1861, with the Civil War, which is very expensive, the federal government begins printing paper money not directly backed by gold. Sort of like what we have today, the so-called greenbacks. They were printed with green ink, that's what I call that. They were backed only by the full faith and credit of the federal government. Doing this increases the money supply, which is what the federal government wants during the war, because wars are expensive, right? And so this is an inflationary policy. With this policy, then, of increasing the money supply during the Civil War, you get all the phenomenon that I've written in black right here on this side of the board. After the Civil War, these creditors, bankers and financiers, have a great deal of influence with the government during this time, this era of fantastic corruption. They start pressuring the government to reduce the money supply during this era. They want to go back to what they called the gold standard, where every dollar was directly convertible into gold bullion, a so-called specie or hard currency. They see gold as having God-given value. By 1873, with our currency wars, these fellas, the financiers, they began getting their way. And the so-called Crime of 73, that's what rural America called it, the Silver Demonetization Act is passed, which gets rid of silver as currency. Not existing coins. Existing coins are always valuable in terms of transacting as coins, but the federal government says we will no longer coin any more silver dollars. Doing this starts to create a period of deflation. Or you start to see a period now where you're on the red side of our list with the money supply being reduced. To reduce this money supply has a series of then different winners and losers. Farmers who were producing more during this time, as prices dropped for them for what they were getting for their commodities, are feeling the squeeze of having it harder for them to get money at the same time as the middlemen were taking more away and their own overproduction was playing this role. They felt double hit. So what you see here is at the same time, we're seeing Western discoveries of silver in the old Mexican cession territories of Nevada, California, etc. Silver miners plus these Western farmers now want to spend silver dollars, and they begin pushing for what they called bimetallism. In other words, a two-tiered monetary system of silver and gold, with silver being coined at the ratio of 16 silver pieces to 1 piece of gold, which would be an inflationary policy. There was various compromise legislation during this era, the Sherman Silver Purchase Act and the Bland-Allison Act, which pumped a token amount of silver into the economy, but this satisfied neither side. The gold bugs, those that wanted no or only gold in the economy, seeing as having God-giving value, saw any silver or paper money as being bad. And for the silverites, it was such a minuscule amount for the whole economy, it was not making a great change. So as such, during this period, you see more and more rural agitation, which combines into what we are going to see as the Populist Party platform. The platform, the key element everyone saw was the unlimited coinage of silver. But remember, rural America was frustrated in many ways about losing what they saw as a struggle for control of the country to this new emerging corporate class. And it's this last struggle, the last serious political struggle between the Jeffersonian yeoman, the small independent farmer, and then the Hamiltonian big business nation state, urbanized financial state of the future. And the populists had an extensive platform trying to regain control for the plain peoples they saw, the common people of the United States. Their platform was mostly multifaceted. It called for an 8-hour workday to try to get labor involved. It called for the initiative, referendum, recall, which are all laws designed to put power in the people's hands in the ballot box. Recall meant people could vote out of office a politician who was in office ahead of his term expiring if they didn't like him. The initiative, people could suggest laws, put it on the ballot if they wanted to for an up or down vote. Referendum, if money is going to be spent by the government, the people get to decide what that money is going to be spent on, or people are proposing a law, or the law a law is being proposed by the government and people will vote an up or down vote on that law. Secret ballot, direct election of senators, once again, more power in the hands of the people. And these were all part of this major comprehensive platform. The Panic of 1893, once Grover Cleveland gets reelected, only further exacerbates these tensions. By 1893, with overspeculation, we'd seen our business cycle come to sort of an economic downturn. And I want to explain to you briefly where the business cycle goes and comes from, some basic economics of the cyclical economy. The economy operates on a model that would be considered similar to the seasons: fall, winter, spring, summer. And so these seasons actually kind of perpetuate and revolve around themselves. It's not really in a circle. I suppose it would be more accurate to say it's more like what a mathematics class you would call a sine wave. In other words, the economy goes through periods of good times and bad times, over time, through time, as opposed to simply just repeating itself in the same place. But for our purposes, I put it in a cycle so you can see what these phases are. During prosperity, you have a period of what would be referenced as easy money. In other words, credit is readily available. When credit is readily available, persons, banks, and businesses will all eventually overextend, right? They'll put too much on their proverbial credit cards, they'll overbuild, overproduce, which will lead to a drop in demand or people being overextended trying to cut their purchases. Both of these things are going to ultimately eventually lead to recession, right? Overextension leads to contraction as people try to hold back on what they're purchasing. Corporations produce too much of an item and then have excess inventory. With recession, you see the dropping of consumer confidence. People will buy less. And the quickest ways that companies can reduce their expenses is to lay off workers. So you have people buying less and laying off workers at the same time that money's hard to get. You have a massive draw on banks' resources. And so that is going to ultimately lead to depression, mass layoffs, mass unemployments, mass bank failures, and a so-called credit crunch. Everybody needs money and can't get it. Over time, though, in an economy, somebody will always be able to afford something. Maybe you cut down on your luxuries, but you're always going to need to eat. You're maybe not going to buy a $30 steak at a restaurant, but you're still going to buy food where you can get it. People still get sick, they still injure themselves, so you're still going to get medical care, and there'll always be somebody in the economy who can afford something at some level. So you have modest economic activity going on, businesses will stabilize, the ones that made bad decisions go out of business, the strong will survive. The banks that made bad decisions go out of business, and the strong survive. Over time, as the economy begins to stabilize in this model, consumer confidence will rise as those who have money spend it, and then you begin to have upward traction or suction on the economy. As more money gets spent and consumer confidence rises, more people are taken off the unemployment lines and are put back to work in companies that need them, which will lead you back to prosperity and easy money up at the top, where you have full economic activity. Well, during the Panic of 1893, you saw a massive recession which turned into a depression. It was the overspeculation in the financial markets and railroad building and land sales all combined to this, as well as overproduction. And it was the worst economic depression until the Great Crash of 1929. 20% of Americans were jobless. President Cleveland blamed it on an unstable monetary supply. And so his solution was to cancel the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which made all the farmers and frontiersmen and lower class producers furious. And this set the showdown, set the stage for the great showdown of 1896, the populist election between William Jennings Bryan for the Democrats and/or populists and William McKinley for the Republicans. We saw marches on Washington, such as Coxey's Army, trying to get people to inflate the currency and try to provide some sort of maybe what you call today maybe unemployment compensation or benefits that gets broken up. But the populists wind up going on this, what is known as the Silver Crusade. All these other elements of their platform, they still wanted, but they were lost amidst this issue of free silver. In this election, the Democrats kind of stole a march on the populists and took their candidate, William Jennings Bryan, at least a young Democrat, and named him as the Democratic candidate who was going to push for the exact same thing the populists wanted on free silver. This left the populists with a dilemma that all third parties have: join with the Democrats or keep their own party identity. In the end, they fused with the Democrats and sort of submit or lose their own political identity in the process. In so doing, they try to unify in hopes of being able to secure enough votes to overtake the Republicans, who are the party of big business, the party of the gold standard, the party of financial stability, and sort of a contractionary financial market. In this election, despite the Omaha platform, the populists and the third-party elements suffered from the things that all third parties suffer from. They have weak organization, and there was a wedge. The populists could not unite blacks and whites in the South. The Democratic Party effectively played the race card, telling whites, vote Democratic, vote as you shot, vote bloody shirt. Don't vote for the populists because you get Republican rule, you could lose, it could be bad, and social issues trumped economic in terms of Southern understanding for farmers during this time. So the result is this Jeffersonianism, if you will, versus Hamiltonianism. The Hamiltonians win. The nation state of Hamilton, the future, from all the way back when we talked about the idea of Hercules in a cradle, a nation of big financial commercial markets, an urbanized nation of producing classes and production in commerce and finance. That nation comes to the fore, and its executive or policies dominate the executive branch from there forward. So this is sort of the last gasp of the traditional yeoman. Now, that being said, the reform spirit would survive. Many of the reforms the populists wanted, they will not get. We'll see other Americans get in future decades in terms of the changes they want to put more political power and voice into the hands of the common people. But those would be stories for separate units. As for the populists, they'll collapse after 1896. New gold discoveries and the return of economic prosperity will diminish the anger towards government this way and will sort of validate in the views of the voters the Republican approach. And that'll take us into some of our next units in the future.